published in the mid-1870s. Quotation: deficient and irregular school attendance, insufficient supply of prescribed teaching material for the children, inadequate and incomplete teaching aids, a large number of inadequate school buildings and furniture totally unsuitable. In the Zveza County, barely 30% of children eligible for school attend classes, and of these 30%, barely 1/3 attend school on a regular basis. Furthermore, children are very irregularly supplied with prescribed books, copybooks, and notebooks. End of quotation. In such circumstances, informal forms of education, such as self-education, private institute instructions by private tutors or governesses in middle-class or noble circles, played a major role in 19th century Croatia. I will illustrate the role of these forms of education with examples of the intellectual formation of several distinguished members of the Croatian intellectual elite of both sexes. The material of autobiographical discourse, autobiographies, and diaries will be used as the principal material for analyzing their intellectual formation and spiritual maturation. Politician and publicist Marcinkiewicz-Wilk, in his autobiographical notes, provided the most detailed description of his own education. His book is a combination of memoirs and autobiography. His narration is strongly marked by self-irony, and the text can be read as a personal history of emotions. Marcinkiewicz was born into a well-off family of lower nobility in Karlovac. He received his first teaching from a governess. She taught him Italian and French based on popular songs, opera arias, and everyday conversation. The teaching did not include grammar, reading, and writing. The boy had an extraordinary memory and learned it easy, and by the age of 5, he already spoke Italian and French fluently. Since his parents considered him too young to read and write, he learned these skills himself. He had a book with copper plate engravings of different saints, with their names written in capital letters beneath. His mother, or governess, would tell him the name of the saints, and he memorized the figures linked to individual names. Then he copied their names with chalk on the room's wooden floor. Seeing the boy's interest in writing, his father engaged a private tutor who taught the boy reading, writing, and arithmetic. Kalac was very enthusiastic about the library of Count Jurczyk-Romanowska, their neighbor. Since practically all the books in the library were in German, the boy decided to learn the language to be able to read books from the Count's library. Unable to find a suitably qualified teacher, his father hired some German officer and subsequently a guardian. After he returns to his homeland, the boy's parents did not manage to find anyone to replace him. The boy perfected his knowledge by reading books from the Count's library. Kalac's father felt that the boy was too young for regular school attendance before the age of 10, so he received an education suitable to his family's social status in his own home, and consequently he studied drawing, painting, and music. He was taught by private tutors who would come to the house several times a week. By the age of 11, when he started attending regular school, he had read many books in German, Italian, and French, novels, poetry, history and geography books, travel books, and natural science books. Despite his great knowledge, he wasn't allowed to start the second class due to his very bad handwriting. His teachers, Franciscans, were poorly educated, having received no education from teachers whatsoever, and Hans critically concluded that he did not learn anything in elementary school but how to have a neat handwriting. During the holidays, he read all school books for gymnasium that the parents had purchased for his elder brother. He asked permission to take examination for the first two classes of gymnasium and requested direct enrollment in the third class of gymnasium, but he wasn't allowed to. For this reason, he felt that he lost 6 precious years of his life. Since he much time for his schoolwork and studying, he daily painted and played the piano for 2 or 3 hours, took occasional walks, and read the rest of the time. In gymnasium, he studied Latin, Greek, and Hungarian, and studied Czech, Polish, and Russian on his own. He read all the masterpieces of world literature, mainly in their original languages, major work in history, archaeology, geography, philology, philosophy, politics, biblical history, and art history. His vast knowledge surpassed that of his teachers. However, Kalac self-critically assessed that this had very detrimental consequences for the development of his personality. He became conceited, excessively self-confident, at times impertinent, rebelled against the authority of teachers and every other authority. He stated, quotation, "School did not develop my mental and moral features in any respect. Without school, I would be left without many of my moral faults that I had my entire life. Later, I could never get rid of the evil side of self-education." End of quotation. The autobiography of writer and politician Ksavr Šandor-Đalski, entitled Rukovet autobiografskih zapisaka, was written at the publisher's request and published as an afterword in one of his books. He was born into a well-to-do aristocratic family on the family's estate in Virevice in Croatian Zagorje. He received quality education appropriate to his social status. His father was an attorney, and elementary administrative personnel also worked in his castle. One of them started to teach the young boy to read and write for fun. Therefore, Đalski mastered these skills already by the age of 5. Then he began receiving systematic education. The boy was first taught by a tutor who would daily come to the castle, but soon a permanent private tutor was engaged. When the boy was 7, the family moved from the estate to Varaždin due to his father's work, and since that time the boy attended elementary school, but simultaneously also took private lessons from his private tutor. The house tutor was soon replaced by an elder student from gymnasium who gave the boy lessons in almost all school subjects. Obviously, he needed private lessons because Đalski demonstrated far more interest in reading other books than in learning school material. He studied foreign languages. In addition to Latin and Greek, he studied French and German, and later Russian too. He read French and German classics, books on history, philosophy, and natural science, and he was especially interested in Charles Darwin's theory. Like Kalac, Đalski too was critical about his school teacher. He criticized their relatively poor education, their uninteresting way of lecturing, and their insistence on mechanical repetition of school material. From his autobiography, it can be concluded that he considered self-education to be much more important for his intellectual formation than formal education. The diary and family correspondence of Andrija Torpar-Brvić are the sources of information on the education of this politician and publicist. He was born into a middle-class family in Slavonski Brod. His father was a prominent Croatian linguist and merchant, who very carefully directed and oversaw the education of his eldest son. The boy was very intelligent and motivated. His education was a combination of public school attendance, private lessons, and self-education. After the young Brvić completed primary school in his native town, he did not attend school for 1 year, but took private lessons in music and in the school subjects taught at the gymnasium from an educated Franciscan. Andrija continued his education at the Vinkovci Gymnasium and at the higher gymnasium in Zagreb. He was very hard-working and ambitious pupil, and in addition to the subject of the gymnasium, he was studying music, drawing, Hungarian, and other subjects. It seemed that the vast knowledge which he largely acquired through self-education inspired in young Brvić, like the Kalac and Đalski, a boost of excessive self-confidence, which became evident in his critical attitude towards his teachers. After completing higher gymnasium, he was studying theology in Vienna. During the first month of his theology studies, he studied ecclesial and general history, archaeology, logic, philosophy, and psychology. He studied Czech, English, and Polish grammar on his own, as well as Arabic and Sanskrit. He read domestic and foreign press in Croatian, German, and Czech, science book and literary works in German, Latin, French, and Slavic languages. Under the impression of the revolutionary turmoil of 1848, he temporarily left Augustineum, where he prepared his doctor's thesis in theology. In the meantime, he gave up his theology studies and completed law in Vienna in 1850s. In his later public activity in politics, literature, and historiography, his extensive knowledge, which he for a large part acquired through permanent self-education, became apparent. Jan Stojanović, one of the most prominent Croatian educators and popular writers of the 19th century, was born into a peasant family in Banja Greda, in the Slovenian military border. The autobiography of Mijat Stojanović, Zgode i nezgode moga života, is in some parts a combination of memoir and diary entries. He describes his first school experience with a very picturesque vocabulary and emotional tone. Because of his fear from his strict teacher, Stojanović was unable to present the little knowledge that he had and was the worst pupil. Only after some time did he manage to liberate himself from this mental block and learn better. Encouraged by his second teacher, he soon became one of the best pupils in the class. After the end of the second class of the trivial German village school, he could not continue his education because he was needed as a hand in farming. But soon he became assistant to the teacher that had previously taught him. Then he began the painstaking process of self-education and professional development that would last his entire life. During the day he worked at school, and at night he studied and prepared for classes. He gradually advanced from assistant teacher to senior teacher and prepared himself for the prescribed exams that he successfully passed. He reached the peak of his professional career in 1871 when he was appointed district school inspector. He read domestic and foreign literature and technical literature, wrote articles for newspapers and magazines, wrote school textbooks and other books. He was truly a self-made man. And now about two women. The autobiography of the famous Croatian writer Ivana Vrlić-Mažuranić was written in a terse style, answering the questions of the editorial board of the biographical lexicon that the Yugoslav Academy of Sciences and Arts planned to publish. She was born into a family of most prominent Croatian intellectuals in Ogulin. Her father was a high justice official, and her great-father, Ivan Mažuranić, was a Croatian viceroy. As a member of a comparatively well-off middle class, she received corresponding education appropriate to her social status. Since the family often relocated due to her father's work, Ivana completed just 2 classes in public schools, 1 class in elementary school and 1 class in a higher school for girls, getting the rest of her education through private lessons at her home, predominantly in French. Subsequently, she began to study German, then Russian, and English. She expanded her knowledge by reading books in these languages. She rated her education as truly incoherent. She assessed the negative as well as the positive consequences of her free choice of books for her intellectual development. Many gaps in reading that needed to be filled later, and freedom of judgment. In her childhood, she concluded that writing is incompatible with female duties. Only when her children showed an interest in reading, Ivana felt that her desire for writing can be reconciled with her motherly duty to provide guidance to her children in this field, and she began writing stories and poems. In other words, It was only after fulfilling the duty of wife and mother that she was ready to venture beyond the stereotype of the time of middle-class woman and became a writer. And the last one, Dragoljub Jovanović. From the diary of Dragoljub Jovanović, writer and teacher, we can reconstruct a far less comfortable life path. She completed elementary school in Karlovac, where she was born, in a middle-class family. She was very hardworking, intelligent and curious, and mastered school material with ease. She completed her formal education at the age of 13. She read novels, stories, travel books, midwives, and other. Through her own efforts, she learned embroidery, sewing, and excellent cooking. She became skilled in card games, played with zither and zang. Due to her problems with incontinence, she did not want to marry. She decided to become a governess. She worked as a governess in wealthy families in Graz, Trieste, and Venice. Later, she worked as a teacher in a higher school for girls in Karlovac, then as a private tutor in Primic, near Karlovac. She became active in Croatian literature in the 1840s and wrote poems, stories, novels, and dramas. In her teaching profession and literary production, she discovered an alternative form for realizing her female identity. And now to conclusion. Operation Intellectuals, whose autobiographies and diary entries have been analyzed for this presentation, critically assessed their extensive knowledge acquired through self-education as unsystematic. They emphasized that their self-initiated engagement on the expansion of their own knowledge encouraged the development of free spirit and critical attitude towards what they read. The knowledge acquired through self-education helped all of them realize their own creativity, wishes and plans, especially professionally, but also to develop excessive self-confidence. Thank you for your attention.